Hello everyone, it is your old pal Living Dead, and this is Fish in a Barrel. It's a map by Handsome Fridge, and it is the second map in the Handsome Hellscapes collection. We're playing in GZ Doom on Ultraviolence. This is a PK3 file. I actually believe this is all UDMF, so probably do need to play in UDMF compatible source port for any of these maps. We're dealing with 114 monsters and 5 secrets. Oh shit, that's almost a little bit of a troll secret. I like it. Getting things off a little spicy to start with. So this map is part of a collection that this author has put together as a sort of retrospective of the first year of his mapping journey. So I believe map 1 is probably the first map that Handsome Fridge made, possibly map 2, and so on and so forth. I'm not 100% certain if it's chronological order or not. But needless to say, I think looking at these would represent a pretty interesting journey into a mapper's proficiency of becoming a mapper. I'm digging this custom music we got going on so far. This is also by the author. So I'd be curious to know, is Handsome Fridge somebody who got into music first or got into mapping first? Probably music first, right? That's pretty cool. So yeah, this is the second map in the WAD set. The WAD set, is that a thing that people say? Map set? It's the second map in the set. Not a good place to fight a Kako, but not too hard to deal with. And already I can tell we have a much higher quality map than the first one. Key takeaways being some things that I pointed out. You know what, I'm going to probably go back that way. So we'll go ahead and hit the switch and I'll talk this out in a second. 2-part switch. Interesting choice. My only guess is that this switch, when it raised the ceiling here, also performed some secondary action elsewhere in the map. And then this switch is what opened the door. So if you are going by vanilla, there isn't really much in the way of actual scripting that can happen. So, for instance, something that needs to happen in 2 stages, like a ceiling raising at some point in the map and a door also opening following that. I believe one of the only ways you could technically do that is with 2 switches. So that's why this switch is revealed by a ceiling raising, because let's just imagine, and like on the other side of the door, another ceiling raised and perhaps monsters came out of it. The one thing you would do maybe in that situation is just make both of those doors, and then it consolidates it down into one switch. However, all that being said, this is UDMF, so you can actually accomplish a 2-stage switch with a script, with ACS. You can basically hit the switch, and then you can tell it to do any number of things. You could, I don't know if there's an upper limit to it, you could have it do 10 things. It could summon monsters, it could open 2 doors, it could spawn a super shotgun next to the player, it could also raise the floor and turn something out of poison. It could even change the music. All that can happen in one switch. Toxic waste level lowered. See, that's an example of something that you can do with scripting, is the text showing up. So it did 2 things. It called the display text function, and it also changed the floor height, and possibly, if it drained the lava, it could have even changed the texture and removed the damaging floor. All that could be done with a script and multiple lines on the script. So, all that being said, it serves to kind of raise the question to me and ask, why was that 2 switches in the first place? There could be a reason for it, as I've sort of previously outlined. It could also just be that the author wasn't really too sure what they were doing. And actually, now that we think about it, right, wasn't there, this hatch is opened elsewhere. Courtesy teleport to safety. Huh, that's kind of nice. I like that. The other part of it, too, was what? This... in here was a switch. So we have... To deal with progression, we have a sequence of 3 switches. And I think especially given that we're in such a short vicinity, your task as a mapper, if you choose to accept this mission, would be to figure out a way to consolidate these down into one switch. So perhaps you do something like, well, I need to open multiple things. Maybe the switch unlocks access to a key, and there's some line defs that we travel over to trigger to make other things happen. That could also be another way to do it. You know, that one of the switches opens a room. Going in the room, you will walk over several line defs that do other things, because you guarantee that the player will need to go over those line defs by way of accessing the progression. Or maybe you do ACS scripting and you just make the switch do the same thing. Do all 5 actions, or however many actions it ends up being. Or you could do boom scripting and accomplish that same thing with voodoo dolls. So there's a number of ways you could do it. Or you could just cleverly think about how you're structuring the progression and see if there's ways to just eliminate the extra steps. And why would you do that? Hitting switches is part of Doom, but it can start to feel somewhat repetitive. So even though hitting switches is, I would say, a core part of Doom, I think that if you are omitting switches from your maps, you're doing something a little weird. But again, it begins to feel repetitive, and so just take stock of the fact that in the sequence of, really, if I hadn't been talking, what would have been the span of about a minute and a half, coming into this room, hit this switch, kill imps, hit this switch, go back the way we came, go into this room here, and hit this switch. That is 4 switches in the span of about a minute or so, and I would always urge a mapper to try to consider a way to reduce that. It just seems like it's kind of pointless to do that. So, not necessarily a criticism. Like, it doesn't necessarily make the map worse. But, let's think about from mapping for a second. Playing with infinitely tall actors, that sucks. Let's think about mapping for a second, and you know, what are the things that we do? Like, let's say we feel really confident about our mapping. How do we put that spit shine on it? How do we put that final layer of polish? I would say this falls closer to that territory of that extra polish type of thing. It's not going to ruin the map, but it would be something that would keep you from getting, like, you know, an A+ on a map if you were already in A- territory. That is not a secret. I haven't found any of the secrets so far. So far, the progression has been pretty interesting, though. A little bit more to it than the previous map. It was called Unwelcome. This is called Fish in a Barrel. I like that we had this starting area that we traversed back and forth through a few times. What would make that slightly more interesting is just a degree of, like, transformation. The monster closet's open, so that's good enough, but that's, again, one of those things where it kind of separates the difference between a map that starts to feel repetitive and a map that feels like it's constantly doing something to surprise you. So you think, well, I've got, you know, I want to relegate this part of the map to a specific space. You know, I don't want to have just a sequence of like 25 hallways that we go down and that's this part of the map. I want to use this cool room that I made over and over again. So you start thinking, let's put some switches on opposite ends of it. So you start on one end, you go to the other end and you hit a switch, that activates something, you got to go back to the other end, hit another switch, you know, so on and so forth, to however many degrees of complexity you want to add. You think to yourself, well, the player can't just go back and forth from A to B 2 or 3 times. They also something needs to engage the player. So you think, well, let's open some monster closets. And that does kind of accomplish that, and it keeps it from feeling super routine. But it will make the map begin to feel a little bit grindy. So we're dealing with repetitiveness and grindiness. And what does that kind of contribute to? Well, you know, you want your action in Doom to feel a little bit punchy, and you ideally don't want the player to get to a feeling where they think, oh, thank God it's over. Exception being, like, you know, it's supposed to be intentionally very tense, and they are dealing more with an emotional relief than they are like a relief from their boredom, which, you know, let's be pedantic, boredom is an emotion, but that's not what I'm talking about. So you run the risk of that when you begin to make Secret area opened somewhere in a dark corridor. That's kind of neat. I like the hints. You start to think, how do you kind of have your cake and eat it too? Well, you start opening monster closets. That's part of the way there. You just transform the area in other ways. So like entire walls come down and make the arena. You're like, oh, I didn't even know this part of the room existed. You know, you essentially recontextualize it. So, you know, maybe in a situation like this, you know, and this is just a very first idea, but like, you know, this whole section is just, maybe there's nothing behind it, and you put like a whole new arena in it. Oh, there's an arrow. Interesting. A lot of people have qualms about using arrows in the maps. I will refrain from commenting on it for now. You know, the whole arena transforms. It's like, oh, this is a whole new space. I have a whole new, you know, flow to kind of move through. It's doubled in width or whatever, and the types of monsters in it are becoming different. It makes it feel a little bit different, you know, things like that. So rather than just peer back and forth through the same area, now you are making it a little more interesting. So a lot of rambling in this here, but these are just some of my off-the-cuff thoughts about, you know, mapping and where players can start turning their attention to really making things have more polish than just their first initial maps. So I'm a little unclear about where I'm going or what I'm doing. A secret hatch has opened. Didn't comment on it earlier, but STARTAN starting room, I will say is just a tad deceptive in that you would see this and go, oh boy, this map's going to be nothing special. But, you know, for a beginning map, this is pretty good. I'd say overall so far, I'm probably coming across as nitpicky, but you should also take that with the grain of salt that I am also just talking about stuff that I see to fill time while I'm making this video. So, just because I call something out and I spend 5 minutes on a diatribe against it, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm like disliking what's going on in the map so far. I think the progression is really interesting. I like that the central area serves as a hub several times. So to tie that back together with sort of the rambling that I had been doing, you know, this is an area that has a cool, you know, interesting look to it. It's, you know, we see some attempts to kind of tie these different places together. I have a feeling that perhaps this was meant to kind of hint at the progression. Well, it would probably work better as if the player could see the key through here. But if you don't play with mouse look, you can't. So I didn't realize that that's where this went. I mean, you could probably just barely see it. I think 99% of the time the player's not going to see the key down there. But, you know, you have some attempts to kind of tie these areas together so they don't just seem like isolated from one another. Now, what I'm hoping to see soon is the sky somewhere. That would be nice. A little touch. Oh, shit. Did I just miss this? And I just kind of forgot this was here? How did I get to that? I think I just kind of rambled myself into sort of forgetting what I was doing. How did I get to the... Oh, the yellow key teleported me to a different area. That's right. Yeah. That's kind of also the... One problem that I struggle with as somebody who makes content and narrates it is that I spend a lot of my attention thinking about what I'm talking about, and I play Doom more or less on autopilot, and then I don't remember how I got through different areas or where I was going, and don't remember what the name of the WAD author is, you know, stuff like that. No, Baron. Oh, that. Just kind of like that. Just like 1 second I went and looked at the monster count. And I shot the rocket at the imp instead of the Baron like I wanted to. But maybe I should be... Let's see, okay, look at this guy. I want a berserk. But you know what? Chain gun will do for now. Nice top up here. Huh. Interesting little concept here. Oh, am I supposed to hit this switch? Interesting. So that was Okay, that was a single stage. That was just several things that happened all at once. Kind of interesting little concept there. I was about to kind of say it was another, you know, door with hit points, that Baron there. But it actually kind of has like a second purpose to it. This kind of gives me almost Fortress of Mystery type of vibes. I don't mean that as a pejorative, but the whole like going in one door and then doing a thing that like opens the door right next to it, or maybe like House of Pain. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Kind of an interesting concept. It's like, it's not exactly a puzzle, but it's a little more mentally stimulating than just cool little, is this a secret? A little more mentally stimulating than just if it's you know, just doors that you open and bad guys that you shoot. Just a tiny bit more to it. So, one thing that I find kind of interesting about the map layout here, and it's something I kind of clued in on when I was making the map, the video of the previous map, Unwelcome, is and I don't know how much it's necessarily talked about, but it's just something I've kind of observed. New mappers tend to have this tendency to make like what I would call journey maps, where it's like it's very much tends to play out like a sequence of rooms that are strung together. And so you usually, you know, you'll start out in an area and you'll just go through the map and you'll keep going through the map and you'll just keep going through the map. You know, it's like you get the key, you go to the area, it takes you to the next area, takes you to the next area. And what I mean by that is that, like, you know, you could envision almost that the map is more like a long hallway than it necessarily is like an interconnected space that actually exists. Even Doom, when it's in its abstract, still feels like the spaces exist and have a purpose. And I feel like new mappers tend to make these maps that are just like, you know, they could almost be distilled, if you're describing them, down to, you know, it's a long corridor. It's just so it feels like a journey. You start in one place, you have a that's weird. You have a low likelihood of ever returning to it, and that, you know, that's just kind of how it plays out. Now this map isn't completely like that. Wow, I fucked that up so bad. In that I wonder if those are UDMF scripted to open the door once you kill them. This map has, you know, several examples where you're kind of going back through previous areas. So it's not quite like that. The first map didn't even necessarily feel like that, but it leaned very heavily on it. And I think that maybe that's something that newer mappers can also be mindful of. You know, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do feel like once, you know, maps do kind of, oh god, I don't know what just happened. Talking way too much about higher concept stuff rather than trying to pay attention to what I'm doing. So, yeah, I kind of almost feel like once, oh wow. Probably should have just come up against the building, would have been the optimal thing to do here. And just get out of the range of the hit scanners pretty much entirely. I didn't do that. Again, another thing where the monster count is increasing because monsters are being summoned into the map rather than pre-existing in the map. So yeah, I feel like once new mappers start to kind of pick up on, you know, making the map a little bit more interconnected rather than like so linear, that's where you really start to kind of make your first like major leaps into your maps feeling less, you know, noobish and more refined or thought out. And again, that's not to imply that the maps are just completely thoughtless. I think that, you know, unless you are just 100% low efforting your maps, and you see those posts on Doomworld all the time where they'll go, I just made this map, I was just fucking around. Cool map, by the way. You know, it's outside of that, most mapping endeavors require some thought, and this one exhibited quite a bit of that. There's interesting little traps. There was setups. There was getting the player into a certain position so that monsters could show up in a certain way. There was kind of going back through and retreading your steps with new context included in it. But I still do think that there's some elements of this map that feel a little bit, journey-ish. And it's not just that you don't go to areas and you don't see them again. It's that, in terms of the decorating itself, there isn't, like classic episode, Knee Deep in the Dead stuff where, like, there's lots of windows and you can see outside, or, just areas of the map that look like they exist that might be beyond the boundary of where the player is actually expected to go. So, like a large cave that, you can't get down to the bottom of it, but you can see the whole thing. Things like that is kind of what I'm talking about here. And new mappers tend to kind of overlook that when they get started on things. This map shows like it's starting to kind of wake up to the idea that it can be more, and it's cool. So definitely you can see the clear stages in this sort of mapping journey where the first map in this collection is absolutely Handsome Fridge kind of cutting his teeth on the process, and this one is like, okay, I figured out a few things. Let's play around with some more ideas. We're gonna play around with some scripting, some text displaying, and quite a few other kind of elements. And I'll be interested to see what kind of changes we see when we play the third map. So I'm going to be going into that one. I also like to point out this intermission screen. I like this. It's an AI generated artwork. I love the fact that it's this author's iconic black bow tie that is just kind of randomly here in nature, etched in rock, like it is just manifested. This was Fish in a Barrel by Handsome Fridge. I'll have more videos coming up. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I hope you take care.